presentation and this budget. It's hard to do that sitting here on the fly, but if I go to page 10 of the handout, I don't know if people in the audience have, and I'm going to compare this year's budget to last year's adopted budget, and I'm going to go down to the total outgo. Okay, we see last year was 116, and this year 116 million. This year is 111 million. That's about a $5 million cut this year over last year, and I think the FA presentation showed us about $5 or $6 million of cuts. I think it was closer to 6 and 5 up on the board. And then when we add back the million in benefits that we saw back on page 7, we would say that if we started at 116 and we cut, and you cut 6 and you add back 1, we're at the 111. So that to me is a very oversimplistic to the million reconciliation between the two presentations. The other issue then is up under total income. So total income last year, not counting the reserve, I'm just focusing on the actual new money in, is 116 million last year, and this year it's 109. So, and I think everybody agreed on that. It's a best guess at the moment. Who knows what's going to happen in November. It's 109. That's the 1.8 difference that both the administration has said we had an extra 1.8 last year, we're putting it into this year. So for everybody's sake, to me, short of somebody spending hours on it, that's an oversimplistic reconciliation between the two presentations. I then want to address reserve. So we know we have $20 million in reserve, and I think everybody agrees that we have $20 million in reserve, but we have to understand what is reserve. Reserve is a number on a page. Reserve is what would be equivalent of net worth. If you could almost simplistically say, if I bought a $400,000 home and I put $100,000 of my own money in and I borrowed $300,000, I have a reserve of $100,000 in the home. You could say that. Okay. If, roughly speaking, it's the equity portion that we have. That's what it is. So the issue that we then face is a delicate balance between that reserve is not necessarily in the form of cash. So that's where I made the analogy last week that yes, on paper, we could go $2 million in the hole on paper for 10 years, and we'd still, for all intents and purposes, say we still, are net even. We're not in debt in total. But the problem becomes then not the paper version of the reserve, but at some point, if we're borrowing money throughout the course of the year for cash flow purposes, then we have to start budgeting extra money on the page the following year to cover the interest of that portion. And in some ways, it slowly is like a snowball that kind of starts on the top of the hill and starts rolling down. If you don't stop the snowball, eventually you are a grease, where you're servicing a huge debt, and because you're servicing a huge debt, you have to pay a higher interest rate, and the ball starts rolling faster and faster. So we currently at the college, and now we're getting into individuals' kind of risk tolerance, shall we say, for debt. We certainly are nowhere near a grease down on the bottom of the hill with a fast-moving snowball. But obviously the fact that we're borrowing Tran, that we're borrowing from other funds, we certainly, our snowball is moving. Maybe slowly, but it's moving. So that puts us in a delicate balance. Had we not been in a situation where the state was deferring cash, and in my opinion, I keep saying that in some ways we ought to just take a portion of the reserve and say, this is what the state's deferred, this is the working capital reserve. This is the part that if the state ever gets caught up to where it was, we should figure out a better way to deploy this. But in the meantime, that's not the case. And then you have your emergency reserve, which is the 5 to 8 or 10, whatever number you want to pick. That is, okay, if the big one hits today, what are we doing? You know, so that kind of reserve. So I think part of the delicate balance we have in talking about the numbers is it's easy to focus on the paper numbers, but we need to be careful that the way that the cash is deployed doesn't put us in a fast-moving snowball going down the hill, eventually where students 5, 6, 8 years from now aren't getting classes because money is going to pay down debt. And that's what I'm concerned about. Now, and then finally back to this winter intercession. I do and firmly believe I want to put every dollar we possibly can in the seats. I mean, I want to see people get taught. To me, the shifting of the 16 and 6, instead of having 6 and then 16, and changing that to a full winter intercession or a full spring of 16 with a potential of 6 on the end, says now we can offer students first week of January, thousands of students, lots of classes, keep people employed, and depending on what happens in November and depending on what happens, we can still take whatever extra money, reserve, whatever we had, and deploy that in the 6 weeks at the end in that summer section and offer more classes. It's not like we can't do that if the money's really there. We're just affording a way to reach out to the most students possible at the meantime with a full deployment of winter, spring now. And so to me that is a budgetary question. That's why it comes in here. And I haven't given up hope that instead of this battle over the winter, it's not really, in my mind, it isn't a battle over winter. Winter's going to be here. It's going to be bigger and better than ever because winter is spring. And what I'm worried about is what happens after spring. Can we offer as many sections or classes as possible for students in the summer, i.e. to make up for what we may have lost here. So that would be my reconciliation. That would be my perspective. It kind of comes down to how much are we willing to go in debt. So let's talk about what does it mean going in debt. Many times you would take on a debt for hopes in the future that there would be a return. In other words, let's separate debt. Let's separate debt to do some improvement such that there will be more income in the future. An investment. That's called an investment. As opposed to debt, which is basically just spending over your means, which is more or less like the Greece. Regrettably, though our purpose and mission is student success and offering every class section possible, investing more in a class section now does not mean, it's not really an investment, it is an expense. It comes at the risk of the class section next summer section, or it comes at the risk of incurring debt and not being able to offer more classes to students 2 years from now, or 4 years from now, or 6 years from now. So it isn't exactly a debt investment where it comes back to us in some kind of benefit. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's costing us interest, working against ourselves in the future. So that makes me a little more cautious to go in debt. I'm excited we're using the extra from last year. I compliment the college certainly on doing that. I think what we have on the page is a reasonable budget to do the best we can with what we've got. And of course, we can make adjustments post-November. We can make adjustments post-negotiation settlements and everything else that all these unknowns. So in my mind, I was hoping you were going to make this presentation. I mean, I thought you were going to kind of outline some of this. But in your absence, this is what I've been hearing. This is how I've been trying to follow these numbers. This would be my perspective on it. And I'm just really slow to be one that wants to see the snowball going any faster down the hill, leading us towards any kind of grease situation in the future where we're cataclysmically cutting massive amounts of class sections for future students. So I think that's, to me, what I'm watching for.
Trustee Mann.
Yes, I just want to make a brief comment. I am very concerned on page 10 when you look at compensation as a percentage of income and you see 90%. Those of you who have not read the letter that was sent to San Francisco Community College District by the Accreditation Commission when they were given show cause, why they should not close up and go out of business, should really look at it. And one of the things that was cited was having 90% of their budget in salaries. This is like 5 red lights circling around. So I'm willing to vote for this, but I think this is a real danger signal, and we need to be aware of that, and we need to try to figure out how we can bring this down. I'm glad Vice President Miller mentioned that the Accreditation Commission is coming out with these financial guidelines and these reports, because I think everyone was kind of taken back. First of all, that a college with the size and reputation of San Francisco was put on, show cause. They're developing 2 plans. One plan how to get out of this, and a plan how to close the college in 6 months. So this is very, very serious. So I think it's a good thing for us to be aware of. And I would encourage everyone to go on the ACCJC's website and read the other 13 things that they were cited for. And I know that the board is going to discuss this, and that I think we all really need to be aware that in 2015, we will be reviewed for accreditation, and we all need to start working together to try to make sure that we meet the standards in a way that's acceptable. And reducing this 90% is going to have to be something we're going to have to look at in the future. So I'm pleased to vote for this, but I think we should be aware that there's some really dangerous things beyond the possibility of going in debt in this budget.
Trustee Thompson.
2 quick comments. One, I think it's really very unfortunate that we are where we are this evening with differing views over the numbers and what the numbers may mean, whether it's interpretation or whatever else. This should have been resolved a long time ago. Second, I think Trustee Martin has put his finger on it, though, that the budget is not something written in concrete. Depending upon what may happen in November or whatever else, budgets can be changed, and often are changed as the year goes along. So I don't think that we're taking action this evening. If we take action, that is going to be irrevocable, and I think that's important to keep in mind as well.
Okay, we'll move to the question. We'll start with the advisory vote.
Aye.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? The budget's adopted.